Hello and welcome into the Knicks-Verse. My name is George, and if you haven't subscribed yet, but you've been here before, please subscribe. And if this is your first time here, please subscribe. Turn on the notification bell so you know when I drop these videos, especially like reports like this. When some news breaks, I often jump on and talk about it. Not always, but this one's an interesting one. I find it very interesting. Today, Bleacher Report, Jake Fischer from Bleacher Report put out an article, and then he tweeted this out. Sources say, despite league-wide speculation, New York is expected to retain Tom Thibodeau as the Knicks head coach beyond this 2021-22 season. More details at BR_NBA. You guys should all check out this article. I'm going to review it for you. First thing I want to point out is, first of all, the article broke today. It's written by Jake Fischer, and it talks to a lot of league-wide sources. I will say this. Take this with a grain of salt. Take it with a grain of salt, because we have seen, as Knicks fans, that not much that gets actually reported before it happens turns out to be true. Very, very few things. No one heard anything about Kemba Walker. There was very little speculation about Fournier. So nobody knew whether we were going to keep Burks or Bullock over the summer. A lot of things they get revealed later on. And even then, we don't ever know whether they're for surely true or not, because it's all just speculation, because it doesn't come from Leon or anyone who actually really truly knows what's really going on. You know, Worldwide West doesn't actually say anything specifically. Leon Rose doesn't say anything specifically. Brock Aller, nobody who actually has any influence or decision-making power actually speaks to any of these things. But that's why reporters have to do this job and find out what the mood is out there. Now, league sources may be commenting on what they are feeling and hearing based upon the actions of what the Knicks have been doing, and maybe what they're asking about in terms of type of players that might be available, or whether there has been any grumblings about seeking new coaches. Nothing like that. We haven't heard anything about that. But here you go. This was the article. New York Knicks expected to keep Tom Thibodeau beyond this season. And I'm going to read little portions of it, and then I'm going to comment on it. The first thing is, the one thing I want to bring your attention to is at the bottom, the quote. "That's the danger of overperforming," said one rival team strategist. "You set this expectation." Okay. So I mean, to me, I find it incredibly comical, because what you're saying is, don't overperform, because if you do, then you're just going to be basically writing your own death sentence. Well, this is where the article begins. After weeks of league-wide speculation that Tom Thibodeau's tenure with New York was heading toward an unceremonious end, Thibodeau is expected to remain the Knicks head coach beyond this 2021-22 season, league sources told Bleacher Report. All right, well, New York stands 5.5 games outside of the play-in tournament following a surprising run to the number 4 seed in the Eastern Conference playoffs just last spring, and there has been some internal support to move on from the NBA's reigning coach of the year, sources said. And then comes my favorite quote there. "That's the danger of overperforming," said one rival strategist. "Yet you set this expectation." Well, here's my big eye roll. Yeah. That's what I say to that. All right, here's one thing. When I called for the removal of Tom Thibodeau before the All-Star break, I did it after a lot of deep analysis of what this team is actually doing, what Thibs has actually been doing and not doing, what he's been resisting doing, taking into account Julius Randle and his performance. And I'm going to close with a whole viewpoint on the Thibodeau-Randle situation. That'll be at the end, which is probably at the heart of all of this, if any of this is true. Here's the other thing is, I like I said, take it with a grain of salt. Who knows how this got out there? Who knows who's actually, I don't want to say leaking, but who's actually pushing for an article like this to be written? These are things to take into account. Here's another section here. Knicks governor James Dolan had granted, which I don't know, he was the governor. So the governor James Dolan had granted the front office permission to either remove Thibodeau or retain him, sources said. That is interesting. That's very interesting. I like that. I can believe that, actually. But team president Leon Rose has no plans to make any change on the Knicks bench, sources said. Thibodeau maintains a frequent dialogue with Dolan following each game and often visits the governor's box. All right. I mean, was that before, the collapse? Was that before the, losing 17 out of 20 games? Yeah, before that, I could see Thibodeau going and having a good dialogue. But during that 17 out of 20 game stretch, was Thibodeau really, a frequent visitor and frequently chatting with Dolan? I'm not sure. This is where, when reporters report, they can kind of move things around in terms of the timeline to support certain attitudes. So, again, grain of salt. Here's another part. I'm not reading you the whole article. You guys should definitely read the whole article. Some league officials contacted by Bleacher Report suggested New York's struggles this season have largely been a result of injury misfortune. Preseason projections generally assess the Knicks, nothing to do with refusing to make the changes in the backcourt. Nothing to do with that. Before the injuries. No. Nothing to do with refusing to give significant time to the younger players who are obviously better defenders. Better defenders. The data shows you the young guys are the younger backcourt is the better defensive backcourt than any backcourt we've put out so far this year, with vets included. So it has nothing to do with that. It has to do with injury, misfortune. Preseason projections generally assess the Knicks as a 40-plus win team. That includes Vegas. And, Vegas, there's one thing about Vegas that's odd about them is they don't like to lose money. So when they make incorrect projections, they lose money. So they're often right. They were wrong last season about the Knicks. They definitely were wrong last season about the Knicks. But they're much more often right than wrong. Talking about Vegas. So, which could have netted New York right in line with today's final spots in the Eastern Conference playoff picture. Now, a lot of this depends on whether you believe that the team as constructed is performing exactly as expected, or do you think it's underperforming? Or do you think last year's team overperformed? So these are all the different viewpoints. It depends on how you look at it all, whether you feel that the Knicks have underperformed or not, and then who's culpable for that. Going back to the injuries, but 2 ankle surgeries have limited point guard Derrick Rose, a Thibodeau favorite, who Knicks are losing team without Rose on the team. Before Rose arrived, Knicks were a losing team, and since Rose got hurt, the Knicks totally cratered. And let me tell you, that 17 and 20 losing stretch there, Rose was not around. And Rose is still not back. And Rose has a history of injuries. So depending on Rose to be your point guard to take you to the promised land of playoff, returning to the playoffs again, was misguided all around. It was misguided, whether that's the real expectation the front office had, whether that's the real expectation Tom Thibodeau had. It's a misguided expectation. It wasn't my expectation. But at the same time, when you analyze a team before the season begins, you have to look at the roster itself and you say, well, A, if this happens, B, if this happens, C, if this happens, then I believe this is what the team should be. All right. Part of that was Derrick Rose. I expected him to miss about 20 games. I did. I expected him to miss 20 games. Did I expect the Knicks to completely fall apart during that stretch? No. Because I also expected Julius Randle to at least play to within shouting distance of what he played last season. And until this recently, he was atrocious. He was averaging 14 points a game for a very long stretch, like 25 to 30 games. He was averaging 14, 15 points a game. So remember that. And I'll get back to the end of that. But 2 ankle surgeries have limited point guard Derrick Rose as a bit of error to 26 games this season. Prior to the injury, Rose was arguably New York's best and most important player offensively. Nerlens Noel, a key linchpin to Thibodeau's aggressive defensive scheme a season ago, has appeared in only 25 games himself. Okay, well, Nerlens started the season hurt. Like, he came into the season hurt. So it wasn't like a surprise. Adjustments could have been made. Trades could have been made. I mean, they could have just said, you know what, Nerlens, just sit the rest of the season and we'll go with Sims. We'll maybe bring in another center. If Taj wasn't really the guy that you really were going to depend on. Either way, things could have been done. So to use this as an excuse is lame. Boom. That's my feeling about that. All right. So here's one thing I'm going to talk about for a second, because we have a new partner here, BUSR. It's a sports betting partner. Please check them out. You bet $1, you get $10,000. You get a chance to win $10,000. Pretty easy. There'll be a link in the description below. Jump on them. They're an excellent sports book. They're on the smaller side, which is great because their cash outs are quicker. Their customer service is excellent. And you can bet on all types of things that you want. Also, there's horse racing. There's casino games. I believe you also get with your first deposit 25 casino chips. And they give you 100% signing bonus of whatever it is that you first deposit. So check it out. It's a great one. And support the channel. All right. So back to Thibs. So here's the one thing that it seems like that's pretty obvious. Thibs is the shield for the front office and for Leon. Leon doesn't talk to us, doesn't talk to anybody, really. And Thibs does. Thibs takes the bullets. He takes the bullets for himself. He takes the bullets for Leon and the mistakes that they made in terms of the roster construction and the mistakes that they made in the draft, which I'll get to in a second. So in that respect, I can see the value that he brings Leon. And also, the players who believe in Thibs, they really do believe in Thibs. So that is a plus. That's a plus. Though it does seem like there's been growing frustration in the offensive schemes. We heard from Fournier express it. We've heard it in subtle ways from RJ himself express it. So there's a possibility that there was a conversation and Thibs said, okay, I will look at some alternatives. I mean, I'm speculating right here. I'm like reaching, honestly. But he must have done something to earn himself the survival of this season, because there was no way that Thibs should have survived the All-Star break. No. So once he made it through noon on Monday, the day after the All-Star game, I knew once he survived that we might be stuck with Thibs, not only for the rest of the season, but even for next season. Now, I'm not saying it's the right decision. I think it's actually the wrong decision. I think it's absolutely the wrong decision. You're doubling down when you should have cut your losses early. Leon Rose, talking to you. And if it's true that Dolan gave you the permission to fire him or keep him, you made a mistake right there. Now, it's a mistake that could still work. Thibs, I mean, he's still a coach he's still a winning coach. You look at his record, he's a winning coach, despite what's happened this season. The problem with him is his stubbornness, his inability to outcoach the other coach in game, his unwillingness to adapt to the modern style of play, his denial of the fact that athleticism sometimes is more valuable than experience. Yeah, it's hard to say it, but it's true. I mean, look at Sims. Sims has hardly any experience in the pro game, and look at the effect that he's already having on games when he's in. So, Thibs, just this whole idea that you got to earn it, under what criteria are you holding the vets to that? Because from what I saw, and from what the data showed us, the vets were earning their way out of town, and yet they're still here. And a big reason that they're still here is because at the trade deadline, things could not actually be done to address the issues. And why was that? Because Tom Thibodeau put Alec Burks in a role that actually devalued his value to the Knicks and to the league. It exposed him. It exposed his weaknesses. So why would another team want to give you anything of value in return for a player whose weaknesses have been exposed and who's underperforming, who is shooting below his career averages? All of that was because of decisions you made, Tom Thibodeau. Your unwillingness to start Emmanuel Quickley as the point guard after Derrick Rose went down. That was a mistake. You also have Deuce McBride on the roster. You brought him along so slowly that now we only have like a few games left to even find out what he has. Your unwillingness to play Cam Reddish, making us wait, asking for patience. And then now he's gone for the rest of the season. And we only got to see a few games, and it was so enticing to watch Cam play. Big mistake. So all of those issues, the reason that we're still stuck with them is because of Tom Thibodeau's coaching decisions. And even he said it himself. Remember, he said 20 games, 30 games, 40 games, you're still asking for time. It's all bullshit. Well, almost 2 years and you're asking for more time? I think that's bullshit. And I think it's coming down to the devil you know is better than the devil you don't. That's probably what the issues are. And then it comes down to the Randle situation. Here's the other thing. Here's the other reality. If Randle plays within shouting distance of what he played last season, let's say 85% of what he did last season, the Knicks are in a much... I bet you we are firmly in the play-in picture, if not even possibly in the playoff picture, if Randle had repeated last season. Now, the fact that he didn't is not necessarily Thibs' fault. That's not Thibs' fault, but how he handled Randle is. He did not push Randle to break through whatever he was going through earlier in the season to play the way he's playing now. And he has not held him accountable the same way that he did not hold other vets accountable. So in that respect, they're like attached at the hip. And when one succeeds, the other one succeeds. When one fails, the other one fails. It's just the way they are, the Randle situation. And then also, once again, because of Randle and the amount of rope that he was allowed to take, rope he was given, he has devalued himself. So now it's hard for the front office to get back commensurate value for a Julius Randle. Which then explains why we might be stuck with Thibodeau. Because we're stuck with Julius, unless they can pull off a trade this summer. And then Julius loves to play with Thibs because Thibs lets him do what he does. So then you're like, okay, the devil we know. Now it's the two devils we know. That's the situation for us as Knicks fans. Let's hope that we get lucky in the lottery. But even so, will Thibs play him? If we got lucky and got the number one pick, would Thibs start Chet Holmgren or Jabari Smith? They screwed up on drafting Obi while they had Julius on the roster. Should never have drafted him. So there's a lot of mistakes all around. And I guarantee you this, a year from now, if the Knicks are in the same situation that we're in now, It won't be speculation about whether Thibs will make it through the next season. It'll be whether Leon and Thibs make it through the next season. Thank you so much for watching this. Please subscribe, hit the thumbs up buttons, and drop your comments. I'm very curious to hear your feelings about all of this. And I will see you around the Knicks-Verse.